Okay, part two. This is the rise of my private practice. So, this was the fun part. This was as we were climbing, scaling, everything started to fall into place. It seemed like there was this stretch from like 2020 to 2023 when I felt unstoppable. In fact, I remember many of my passwords carried the word stride in it. I was feeling good about myself. I was clearing well over 540K a year. I was completely off the chair, which was great because I was completely burnt out. I was working very long days, 12 to 15 hours, but I said, well, that's why you make the big bucks. And I was really proud of myself. A kid that had come from small town Indiana into what I felt like was finally success. I was like, okay, I've done it. We had employees, we had an HR department, we had a practice manager. We started to use words like deliverables. We had a wait list for testing that stretched out months, 400 patients a month. I really started to double down in terms of my education. So I was getting every single mastermind I could get my hands on, from Cameron Harold's Second in Command to EOS, Traction, Entrepreneurs Organization I joined, Vistage. I had a business coach. I mean, I just was thirsty to hold on to this thing, maintain it, and get better at doing what I needed to do. I remember meeting with Casey Compton. Again, these programs are never cheap, especially when you're working with them one on one. But she essentially had built what I felt like was where I wanted to be. And they always say, find where you want to be, who you want to be, and then just do that thing. Don't reinvent the wheel. And so I went to her and I worked with her and her partner on my practice. It was really the first time that I saw someone who understood how to break things down in the numbers. And it sort of blew my mind because it made me realize how little I actually knew about running a business, and really just how extremely lucky I got to be even profitable. I had no clue what I was doing, and especially as they were kind of like breaking down numbers and things like that, I just had never thought about my business that way. I mean, they don't teach you that in grad school, right? So they were helping me look at per case. So as a testing, per case revenue, they were helping me look at lead conversion, and they were wanting a lot of statistics from me that I could not give them. So like, what's your lifetime value of your client? How do you generate recurring revenue? Well, we don't. We're a testing practice. You're one and done. They would help me think about what's your lead conversion? So of the warm callers that are calling in, how many convert to actual clients? No idea. What's your call answer rate? No idea. That was, I think, the beginning of the end, which is ironic because I had the best intentions to get better and do better. But it's almost like when you look under the hood and you pull at a thread, it just starts unraveling. And that's what happened. Because I knew more, I came back and I started to look at our conversion rate, and it was abysmal. I think it was like in the 30%. And for a testing practice with warm leads, it should be like over 70%. So then I looked at our Ring Central analytics and realized that this person that we had been paying full time to answer our phones was never answering the phone. They were just texting patients, which drives people nuts, especially of the older generation that just want to talk to someone and make sure that, it's the human on the other end. Also, my first dose of reality, one of them, was asking this person directly, who I had never managed before. I had now a practice manager that was managing this person. Hey, can you give me this login code? Because I wanted to see how much she was responding to her emails. She said, I'm in class right now. This is someone that was billing us every day for 40 hours a week. And she couldn't give me a code because she was in class. So not good. And then our call rate combined. So I realized that we had hired someone who was essentially just charging us by the hour, and there was no accountability of this person's role. In fact, there were no KPIs, there was no ROI, there was no how is this person, are they even doing a good job? And so then you start to look at the people that manage them and think, what are you doing? And for so long, You have to understand, in our organization, our small business, we had two OGs that were running it together. They were essentially like my babysitter. They were sort of like the older moms that were like, no, Colleen, we're not doing that. No, we're not doing that. And for the most part, they kept things running. They were mom and dad. They kept things running. They kept the blinders on for me and just kept going. And when you start questioning things in your organization and start changing things up, you will lose people, I think. Cameron Harold always said, don't hire accountability managers, just hire accountable people. If you start holding people accountable, the only people you're going to lose are people who are unaccountable. That's what happened. So I went from someone who was largely checked out in my business. I would phone in for Friday meetings and be like, great, sounds good. Thanks, guys. Doing great work. Keep it up. To someone who was starting to become a more micromanagey, I would say. I was wanting to know, well, what's the number on that? And how are you tracking that? And these two people had never been questioned like that before. And I think it was annoying to them. Be quite honest, they, for the most part, for years had been left alone. And now all of a sudden, here comes this person who is asking all of these questions and they're thinking, what are you doing? We've got this. Meanwhile, I'm in these Vistage meetings and I'm in the CEO group. And the advice that was given to me with Vistage is, you're not necessarily going to have any other like group practice owners in there with you, but everybody that's a leader of the organization is going to have the same problems, the same pain points. And that's where you learn. And I did. It felt nice to be around other people who were struggling with a lot of the same issues I was, whether it be retention, culture building, wearing too many hats, staffing shortages, whatever. I felt finally a sense of camaraderie. And in the mental health field in general, it could be just super isolating. The issue was that when you're in Vistage, you're with these people that are like CEOs of $700 million organizations. There is no fear that they are going to fall straight on their ass and lose their house, right? They're good. And for every one of them, there's probably 4 other CEOs and 3 other departments and a huge infrastructure built to support them and make sure that they run. I was doing it all. I was the face of the company, the social media, the marketing, the hirer, the firer, the accountant, all of these things. And after a certain time, I felt like these people are not living with the same fear that I'm living with. Like nobody's in jeopardy of losing their home. I was starting to get resignation letter after resignation letter as we got bigger problems, more money, more problems. Notorious Big said it best, right? So we would attract grifters, people that knew how to take advantage of the Massachusetts laws. They would work for us. They'd go on maternity leave. And then if we didn't give them their exact position back, they knew how to use the system and go on permanent leave. We've had to pay settlements. We've had people double dip, quiet quit, and really, really hard to track all of that in a remote landscape. So in this autopsy of my practice, and I'm sure many other practices, death by 1,000 cuts starts with this one, which is the workforce that we navigate right now. Most people are working remotely, at least in our profession. It's very, very difficult to monitor and track time. Now, I did end up adopting TimeDoc software, which I highly recommend, and it takes screenshots. It makes sure that the person that you're paying by the hour is not cruising YouTube. Really, I found the only people that had security problems with it or privacy issues were the people that ultimately were probably going to try to cheat the system in some way. So it helps separate the wheat from the chaff in the way that that goes. The issue was that as you start to pull this thread in your practice, you start to see all these things that are going wrong. And for those of you who have kids, I'll use the analogy of you maybe go in their room for the first time after like a couple days and you see it's a mess and you're like, what is going on in here? And you just lose it. What else are they forgetting, right? That's what happened in my practice is I just pulled that thread and all of a sudden I realized, man, no one is at the wheel here. Like no one. I was very much to blame for that because I like to pride myself on being a low key manager. Like, I'm not even managing you. Like, you just do your own thing. Yeah, it's all cool. And people took advantage of that. Cut two in Death by a Thousand Cuts. As I was in this Visage group, I started to realize the need for an operator or an integrator, a second in command, a COO, an EVP, call it what you will, but somebody who could reverse engineer the many ideas I had and see them through. And while disgust and joy, my practice manager and billers, were great at keeping the ship steady, they had no interest in growing. So every time I wanted to scale or get a new contract or work on this new program, there would always be a reason for like why we needed to focus on this first, right? So it gets old after a while, especially for someone who has a sort of like visionary mindset according to EOS. You know, it's like you do have a lot of ideas and you start to feel like the gas and they're the brake pedals. And it felt very constricting after a while. So I realized if I wanted to grow, I was probably going to need to grow in terms of the type of person that could support me. I realized you get what you pay for. And so I was willing to take a sizable portion out of what I was making to hire someone that was really sort of well adept and well-versed in what they do in terms of being your operator and coming in and like really getting things in order. We had lots of interviews. We had 300 people apply for the position of COO. A lot of people who were way overqualified and wanted way more than what I could afford. But I found someone who was essentially doing exactly what I needed her to do for a much larger practice. I thought, well, this is perfect. Went through 4 rounds of interviews with all of my team. And in reflection now, looking back at how I interviewed, it was a lot of feelings, not facts. It was, okay, so, and then you feel like you can manage a team of people? Yeah. Okay. And then tell me about when you're developing KPIs for people. Are you able to hold people accountable? Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's one of the best things that I'm the best at is holding people accountable. Okay. All right. Good. When can you start? That was it. It was like, great. You seem to know what you're doing. I don't even know what you need to be doing because I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. So I'm going to give it to you. And I could not be more excited for this person to start. I was chomping at the bit, so excited. I was thinking this is going to be freedom, finally. Now, on the other side, I had offers for my practice. I had a lot of sort of private equity firms reaching out, wanting to buy, but the advice that I was given was just make this a lifestyle business and run it that way and get all your ducks in a row where it's running itself and then keep on making that money instead of just one time selling it. So that was the goal. Here's what happened. I abdicated. I did not delegate. I essentially said, here's the keys. Let me know if you need anything. Thank you so much. And granted, I paid for Invest in Your Leaders for this person. We had 3 times a week meetings and I had a whole onboarding blueprint and all of that, right? I did the whole thing according to Cameron Harold about how you onboard this person. I abdicated and I did not delegate. I was not telling this person exactly what they needed to do because I didn't know what they needed to do. I was not overseeing that it was being done. So what that looked like is that in the summer, I handed over the keys and I said, good luck. And I went on vacations with my kids. I was like, I finally did it. I'm off the chair for good. I have figured this out. The business runs on its own. Here we go. Now, this person came in to a system that had been in place for a long time and was disrupting the systems. For anybody that is familiar with family systems, it constantly tries to maintain homeostasis. And so this person was coming in, disrupting it, and then the other 2 were sort of kicking back to try to reset balance. Well, eventually I got a resignation notice from disgust from my biller that said, thank you, but I'll be moving on. This was after 7 years. I knew for some time that I needed to get rid of this person because They were emotionally toxic. We were losing a lot of employees. They were unpleasant to work around. They held all the keys of the kingdom in terms of billing. And so the entire time that they had been there the last year, I was saying, can you put this in an SOP? Can you put together like a billing Bible of all these things? Just because, in case something ever happens to you, we want to make sure that we can carry that on. Person was purposely sort of tight-lipped about all of that, and we got very little information. When I got the resignation at the time, I breathed a sigh of relief. It was something that needed to happen, and I felt like we were finally freed up to build a culture where people felt supported again. This person had lost 4 different practice managers. They had lost 4 different psychometrists, and it was all just because of the sort of attitude that they had when working with the employees. In my mind, I felt like billers are a dime a dozen. I'll just find another biller, like easily replaceable. Not the case. It was probably the biggest reason for why we ended up where we did was losing that biller, because that biller built this rickety sailboat with me from the ground up. And unfortunately, she was the only one who knew how to steer it. And once she was gone, it was really, really hard to find someone that knew the CPT codes for testing and the auth process and all of that in the way that we knew it. I also don't want to make this be this sort of like, woe is me, look at all these things that happened to me, I'm just a victim of these circumstances, because I've done a lot of reflection on where I went wrong, where I can take ownership, and I think what, in hindsight, I would have done better. I am an Enneagram type 7, and for those of you that don't know, it's just sort of a person that's always like looking for the next thing and says yes to everything and doesn't want to spend a lot of time in stillness or contemplation, and really is like a doer. I am sort of classic entrepreneur. I have an idea every minute, and unfortunately, I'm acting on most of those. I move quick. I'm a Colby quick start. So if we have a problem, I'm going to fix it. And I'll give an example. So we had a issue with our intake process where patients would sign up for an intake. They would self-schedule, but then they weren't filling out their pre-screen paperwork. We need all of that paperwork before we see them. And so we had a lot of admin time being spent on people just calling, reminding people to fill out their paperwork. I just switched to Jot forms, because Jot forms they could fill out. It was embedded in the website. They filled it out online, and they had to do that before they could book their appointment. Solved a lot of issues. Disgust and Joy did not appreciate that. They did not like their cheese being moved. They didn't like this new system just being like, next day we're doing this. For that one time, that happened 20 times a month for them. I would oftentimes just go, well, what's the problem? All right, well, let's get this. Let's do that. And I would just do it. I've always been of the ilk of do and beg for forgiveness later rather than beg for permission. So that was the slow build, I think, for them probably was it's a lot working with me. It's exhausting. They probably felt like the goalposts were being moved a lot of the time. So in hindsight, what I would probably do is I probably would have worked with them to say, what's a pace that feels good for you guys? Like, we do have to change some of these things. I'd like to do this. And if you don't have a better idea by this date, we're going to go ahead and move forward with this. Like there's a middle. So that's what I will take ownership for, is that I think I'm a bit nuts to work for. And I understand that I'm not everyone's cup of tea. I am throwing money at these two. Meanwhile, I'm like, I appreciate you guys. You're killing it. We're killing it. They're getting these huge bonuses. And this is great. Everybody's great. Everybody's happy. Everybody's getting paid. Cut to, I'm at a conference. I'm sitting there. It's super boring. I'm going through the numbers because, if you'll remember from part 1 of this, my trusty husband pops his head in the office and says, do you know that you're negative 10,000 this month? That was 10 years prior. This time are you going to be able to make payroll? Never a conversation I've ever had. Never, ever been worried about making payroll. So something was very wrong. Started to dig into our numbers, and I was looking at what is going on. There was just not nearly as much payments coming in from the insurers. I realized our costs were out of control. So there were no caps for our employees. Our psychologists, because they did testing for us and they did these, they were writing reports. There was no like, okay, for every one report you write, you can bill us up to 2 hours. It was like free for all. So you would have one clinician who maybe pumped out 3 reports that week, but they had billed us 15 hours in report writing. There was no way to track that. Well, you're going to go upside down quickly when there's no cost containment. There were psychometrists who were billing, maybe they saw 4 testing patients that week. They'd bill us 40 hours. There's no way one testing client takes 10 hours. But there was, again, no oversight, no cost containment. So as you can imagine, when I'm coming in and saying, whoa, no, for every one patient's report you finalize, you can bill us up to 2 hours. For every one patient you test, you have a cap of 5 hours. You can imagine people are like, oh, gravy train's done. I'm done. We had quite a few defect because of that. It did get down our expenses considerably, which was good, but it was too late at that point. After month 3 of my second in command being in, and I use the term Joy discuss a lot for the practice manager and the biller, but my second in command was, let's call her Jackie. Her name is Jackie. Let's say that. Jackie and I would meet 3 times a week, and I would say, how's everybody doing? How's the team doing? Colleen, I am so impressed with the synergy of our teams. Like, everybody is just firing on all 4 cylinders. I am just so impressed. And I would get off and sort of pat myself on the back and be like, great, wonderful, everything's good. Meanwhile, the biller she hired quit 2 weeks into her position. The other practice manager that she had sent an offer to, we found out had a pretty bad criminal history. So that didn't work out. Then we found out that the 2 front office staff that she was paying 100 hours per pay period, so every 2 weeks, 100 hours per pay period, had an 89.7% missed call rate on Ring Central. So they were not only billing us full-time, but overtime, which is time and a half, and they weren't even picking up our calls. We had 6 people on Asana essentially saying, copay due, $245 deductible due. Nobody was calling the patient. Nobody's collecting the copay. So we're paying a lot of people to just spin their wheels here. Nothing getting done meanwhile. Meanwhile, we've got clinicians pushing out services, no prior auths being gotten. The front office is not registering patients in the right way. We aren't getting prior auths. We're doing a lot of services that we don't get paid for. This is how you go upside down. Now, I'll say that Jackie, my second in command that I hired, my fancy new EVP, was well-heeled, well-polished, looked every bit the COO that she presented herself to be, and just seemed like this is who we need in charge. As things started to crumble, I would have these sort of come to Jesus talks with her, and she would say, Colleen, stick with me here. I've been in a lot worse situations. We're going to be fine. And again, feelings, no facts, no dashboard, no KPIs, no forecasting, just a lot of feelings. The feeling for me was something's not right. Something is very wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it until I met with my business coach who said, you need facts, not feelings. You need numbers. You need an executive dashboard. This person needs to be able to report to you how that fancy salary of theirs is giving you at least 3 to 5x in ROI. She's not able to do that. I noticed that despite the payer issues that we were having, so I would come to her and say, hey, we're going to have to take out a loan to make payroll. She would say, yeah, it's fine. We'll take out a business line of credit. This isn't unusual. We've done this before. It's fine. And then meanwhile, she would hire like a fancy design consultant to work on our logo. So this is where her time was being spent. So I liken this to if your house is on fire and you hire a fireman and they're looking at your curtains and telling you, let's change those out. Meanwhile, the building's burning. That's what was going on. Now, cut 3 of this death by 1,000 cuts is the payer landscape here. So the insurance companies started to capitalize on the pandemic and the mental health issues, they simultaneously were engaging in what's called vertical integration. So they became both the payer and the provider. And that's why a lot of times nowadays you'll see your physicians are owned by Optum, right? They set the rates. They can pay the highest because they are the payer. And so much easier for them to recruit clinicians, physicians at their rates than it is for us who have to negotiate on our own and oftentimes don't get it. At the same time as I am dealing with this sort of infrastructure fire, we're also dealing with a bigger systemic fire. Number one, Optum has this Change Healthcare breach that coincidentally, ironically, holds up millions and millions of dollars for payers who are relying on those checks, who eventually end up going out of business. Meanwhile, then becomes the bank for those providers later to cover the loan. And by the way, they're going to take a vig on that. That bankrupted most practices who were subject to that, thereby clearing the competition for most of these payers who would then become also the providers. You're dealing with a Change Healthcare breach. You're not getting payments. You can't pay your providers. Providers are getting upset because you can't pay them because you're not getting paid. They don't care about the insurance company. You're taking it on the chin for the insurance company, just the same way you do with the patients. Patients don't care. They think you are the insurance company. So you become the vicarious employee for these insurance companies that are now pretty much engaging in antitrust activities. At the same time, these venture capital firms were capitalizing on the mental health issue and essentially had Uberified the therapy space. Where 5 years ago, you might be looking for a therapist and have no idea where to start. And you go to some therapist janky WordPress site that is got God knows where you're going to find the contact button, or even they're checking their email. And then you've got these VC companies that come in and do these pretty BetterHelp, Talkspace, Headway. You've got quick access. And the thing that they did well is that they figured out access for people that were struggling with access to mental health care. The issue is that there was no one waiting on the other side that was going to give you that quality of care. Therapists aren't Uber drivers. You don't just like get in a car and then like get out and you're healed. You have to have a treatment plan. You have to go to the right person to treat what it is, and you have to know what it is that you're treating. So simultaneously, these companies are paying therapists pennies on the dime. And so what are you going to get? You're going to get the worst of the worst. It's going to give therapy a bad name to the masses because people are getting shitty therapy. If you're a therapist that's selling for whatever BetterHelp's giving you, you've already decided that you're not valuable. So why would anybody else continue to go to therapy when they're getting that sort of shitty care? At the same time, because these providers in this tech space are now in bed with the payers, meaning that Optum might become Schmoptum, that's the sister company that then gets these subsidies and also is the provider, or their investment group is investing in these companies. So lo and behold, you can't get the same rates that these other bigger companies are getting because they are the payers. And it behooves them to subject you to clawbacks, audits, delays, denials, lower rates, lower fees, because then you can't recruit and it narrows the competition for them. Why is this legal, you ask? Because they have better lobbyists. So cut number 4 in this Death by 1,000 Cuts is the administrative avalanche that all of us in behavioral health face. So despite being given behavioral health parity, or whatever that means, there is no parity. There's no equality. The behavioral health clinicians are treated like the redheaded stepchildren of the healthcare field still. For me to be able to do a neuropsych evaluation for a patient who's concerned with ADHD, let's say a patient who has gone from caregiver to caregiver, provider to provider, medication to medication, inpatient facility to inpatient facility, all I'm going to do is give you diagnostic clarity and tell you exactly what this patient needs. I need to ask for permission to do that most of the time. And I got to wait 2 weeks to do it. And a lot of times I got to sit and meet with their peer reviewers, who, by the way, have never administered a psychological test in their lives, to tell me how long that should take me. It's completely humiliating and deflating to have to ask for permission to provide the care that you have trained so long to provide. On top of that, the administrative burden that is ever increasing now on clinicians just to be able to accept insurance is untenable. So we are drowning in forms, audits, compliance checklists. Half our day is documenting risk instead of being able to deliver care. We are turning into data entry technicians. I mean, HIPAA was written in 1996. So we're out here duct taping these 1996 compliance rules to 2025 technology and then getting dragged online for not texting back fast enough. It's a complete mismatch, and the payer systems that you work with are purposely obfuscated in antiquity when it comes to paying you, when it comes to speaking with a human. But don't you worry, when it comes to getting their money back, extremely high tech. And in fact, implementation of AI these days now to deny every third claim, because most of the time research shows that providers won't go up against it because they don't have the time. On top of that, in terms of the admin burden, so to be able to deal with these payers and to handle HIPAA and compliance, we are still dealing with very out-of-date EHR systems. We used one called InSync, and it would just, for instance, post payments that were paid by the insurance company as if they were paid to us, not reconciling them with the bank account. Our biller discussed. She was not reconciling ever any of these payments. And so we were just assuming that patients had paid. Meanwhile, TRICARE paid all of their patients directly. So good luck going and trying to chase down your payment from this patient who has cashed their check long ago. Also, combine that with the new laws that do not allow unpaid medical bills to go on a person's credit report. So you have absolutely no leverage when it comes to trying to collect bad debt. Additionally, because of our ethical obligations, you cannot withhold medical records for non-payment. So in our practice, we're moving this patient's report right along. Come to find out, they've got a deductible that's due. They need to pay that. They say, I'm not going to pay that. And by the way, you can't withhold medical records. And so I want my report. You are bound and determined to give them that report, and you're not going to get paid. We did start to put better systems in place for that. We would pull someone off the line as soon as there was an outstanding balance so that there was no report to withhold. We just weren't doing further services and interpreting until it was paid. And that did stop the bleeding somewhat. There are numerous ways and opportunities very easily for patients to hurt you as a practice who is bound by, again, HIPAA compliance and confidentiality rules. So if they don't like the diagnosis that they get, if they don't like how slowly you're moving, if they don't like that you're holding them to their deductible, they go right to Yelp. And you have very little recourse in terms of being able to respond because you're breaking that person's confidentiality. And in fact, in the field that we're in, and you'll find that for most custody evaluators, forensic psychologists, we're not always giving patients information that they want about themselves. We're giving them deep dives into their personality and their diagnosis. Sometimes they're attached to a diagnosis that they don't have. We're also not dealing with the benchmark of mental health in the mental health field. Mostly we'll get people who are motivated by being upset. We'll then take to social media to wreck your business, really, with very little recourse. In addition to that, we were starting to get patients who would go to the Better Business Bureau, the Massachusetts Board of Psychology, and every single time we get that complaint, regardless if it's unmerited, unwarranted, we still have to entertain every single one. And it's not just writing a letter. You have to engage an attorney. You have to file a claim with your malpractice insurance. It is a pain. So every time we had a borderline client who felt like she had an autism diagnosis, or she was supposed to be diagnosed with ADHD and she was not, she could file a board complaint and we had to respond to that. And that is a huge handcuff on the private practice clinician again. So cut 5 here is just the simple handcuffs that this freedom paper, our license, was really supposed to provide, becomes more of a cage. Additionally, as a person who grew up in the sort of meager beginnings that I described in the first part of this series, I had a soft spot in my heart for people who needed to rely on their insurance. And I knew that testing could be done in a way that's affordable. I'm pretty good with technology, and I was able to leverage technology to figure out how to make this work within the constraints that the insurance company would give us, which is not that much, but they would give us maybe, 8 to 12 units from beginning to end to test the patient. I figured out how to do it. The issue is, though, that when you're beholden to insurance companies, you've now got another regulatory body that you're answering to. Not just the board, not just the Better Business Bureau, not just Yelp now, not just your patients, not just your employees, but the insurance companies. And anytime a patient's not happy with what you do, they file that complaint again with the insurance company, and you're in jeopardy of losing your contract. Meanwhile, our rates, our fee schedules haven't gone up in years. It's the exact same it was 10 years ago. Now, I don't know many other professions that work in a job for 10 years without getting a raise. And in some cases, a demotion. CMS cut behavioral health disproportionately this year in terms of our rates. So in a nation that bemoans the fundamental importance of mental health care and mental health and how important that is, we are continuously being undercut, replaced by bots, and commoditized in this way and being sold out to the lowest bidder. You can literally take a coaching course and become a therapist and get some sort of certificate, be paid by the insurance company, and you'll take $37 an hour because, heck, you don't have any loans, right? You can afford it, and nobody knows the difference. So cut 5 in this autopsy, death by 1,000 cuts, is the insurers. Cut number 6 in death by 1,000 cuts are the people. As I go into talking about this, I am still sort of haunted by the fear of being canceled, right? And then I remember I don't give a fuck because I'm not in this anymore. I don't have these employees anymore. And really who I'm speaking to are the owners, the founders, the clinicians who are in the very place that I found myself in last year. So I'm going to be real honest about this. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. There is a generational divide in our workforce. And I'm technically right on the cusp here between Gen X and Millennial. I was born in 1980. I identify more as a Gen Xer for sure. I think we were cut from a different cloth when we were coming up. We certainly were working $4.80 an hour. Yes, sir, may I have another? That was the mentality. You do what you need to do. Nose to the grindstone. You get it done. You get the piece of paper. You move on. Nowadays, you get, if I'm asking someone to be accountable for their time, I get, this workplace feels toxic to me. It feels toxic when I say, I need you to be able to get these reports turned around in less than 2 weeks. I just really feel like the value on work-life balance here is just not here. And I just really need you to be understanding that I do have children and I just need, bitch, we all got children. Everybody's busy. As a leader, I had very little patience for this new zeitgeist that I was seeing unfold. I think that probably the millennials and the Gen Zers are an overcorrection or a course correction to our generation, who very much was of the hustle culture, right? And some of that, I think they got right. Just realizing that money's not the end all be all. They're probably never going to own a home in their life at this rate. Let's figure out how to value the time that we're here. The issue is that the work ethic has not been there. It has been very, very difficult to find the work ethic. I'll pick up the phone and I'll talk to the patient and I'll humanize them. They have not had that level of developmental curation that they needed during the pandemic, I think, honestly. That's why we ended up with a lot of intake coordinators, front-end people who very little human touch. And our humans, our patients, were getting upset, understandably so. The issue that you also face is that, so then what do? You go back and you hire a boomer, right? Or a Gen Xer. While they certainly have that work ethic and will get on the phone and talk to the patients, they don't always have the plasticity to navigate tech that we find ourselves in this day and age. It has been a challenge to find someone that can understand how to operate a remote practice in a tech world with the tech stack that we do. And look, we use a lot. We use Google Workspace. We use Simple Practice. We use Asana. We've got a lot of different systems going on. It's been a real challenge to be able to find that. We have a sort of entitlement culture here, and it's really, really difficult to please everybody. One of the biggest things that I hear clinicians talk about, especially group practice owners, is culture building and the need to build a culture. And there's truth to that, in that turnover is expensive. And I learned that the hard way. Not properly onboarding someone, not making someone feel part of the fabric of your company, not humanizing the person and building things in which you see other people as just like humans and having that connection, you lose loyalty and you're looked at as just another widget for them. If Headway can pay them more than you can pay them, they're out the door the next week and there's no loyalty there. But building culture is a full-time job. Most of us don't have the bandwidth or the margins to hire a culture builder, right? So you end up doing it. So another cut, because we are then exhausted we are running systems, operations, overseeing this, dealing with board complaints, HIPAA, patients, trying to do patient care. And now we got to run a icebreaker party and everybody wear your Hawaiian shirts and tell me one fun fact about yourself. Like who can do all of that? That's the other issue that group practice owners are facing. And I say this because most group practice owners, I think, stumbled into group practice ownership. It was like, oh, well, if I could get two clinicians to do what I'm doing, then I can get off the chair. But really what you end up doing is you run payroll and you've just created another job for yourself. And you're not really working on the business. You're still working in the business, just at a $25 an hour job that could have been outsourced. Simultaneously, we are getting blasted by employees, patients, raked over the coals. We've got employees that are sort of creating a coup within the organization of, well, have they paid you? Have they paid you? As if I'm Jeff Bezos and I'm keeping this like stack of money over here and counting it on my yacht, which was not the case. And in fact, as you'll find out, in 1 year, despite it being probably one of the most stressful, longest sleepless years of my life, I made $45,000. As things started to unravel, this was in 2024, both the joy and disgust were gone at this point. They had both said enough was enough. And I was left with this person who was my EVP. It was like if I am a prop plane and I've hired a co-pilot from Delta Airlines who has never had to really steer the ship, can put it on auto control, go back to the back of the cabin, take a nap because there's so many other safety guards in place. And meanwhile, we're flying this prop plane. If you don't get the nose up, we're going to crash at any minute. You always got to be on it. So as this person, I'm realizing has no idea what they're doing and is completely not the right person for the role, we are getting just absolutely scorched by our employees and our clinicians. We were using Google Workspace at the time. We used Google Chat for intercompany communication, much like some people use Slack. It became a source of where people could air their frustration against leadership. And guess who that was? I would wake up in the morning with a paragraph long of what a horrible leader I was, how they would do things differently, what I should have done differently, and then an I quit publicly in front of the entire company. I would wake up to emails, threats. At one point, when we let go of the two front office people who were overcharging us, I said, I'm going to pay this amount, but I'm not going to pay any more than this. And it's clear that you weren't working these hours, and here's the statistics. At this stage, I was on the phone with my employment attorney every week because there was some issue now as we got bigger. And the employment attorney essentially, their answer every single time was just pay them. Just pay them what they want. Just pay them what they want. And in the state of Massachusetts, if you do not pay them what they want within 48 hours, they can sue you for triple, regardless if they worked it or not. So in both Massachusetts and California, the states that I chose to work in are notoriously one of the more difficult ones for employers. And This was an issue I ran into quite a bit. So the sixth cut in this death by 1,000 cuts was the sheer entitlement combined with the ease of access to legal means for the employees and heavily weighted against structures for the employers. Cut number 7 in this autopsy, death by 1,000 cuts, are the patients. So as a mental health clinician, we don't deal with the benchmarks of mental health, right? We're dealing with people who are sometimes acutely unstable, who have struggled with maintaining their own relationships. And when they feel like they are not getting the service they're entitled to, when you are working with insurance, you take it on the chin for the insurance company. You become the vicarious employee for the insurance company because it's impossible to get a human on the other end for most of these people. And so who do they complain to? It's us. The sheer toll of hundreds of patients a month calling in and telling our front office staff how awful we were takes its toll. And it's not a job that many people can hold, especially of that younger generation, where you sort of have to have this thick skin and not take it personally. Also, on top of that is that one bad Google review can completely wreck you. And if you're not doing good SEO on your own company, that's what takes the front page when they're searching your name. I've had clients email me treatment suggestions from Reddit. I've had people critique my reports and tell me where they want it to change it. I've had families demanding that I write accommodation letters for their kids who don't need accommodations. And as a result, if you don't give them exactly what they think they are entitled to, they'll take to the internet, Yelp, Google. We had patients coming into our office at one point demanding their reports because our front office staff was not answering the phone. As the payments started to dry up from the insurance companies, our providers would soon leave. Number one, I wouldn't want to stay around if I'm not getting paid, and we were only paying a percentage of what we were able to get from the insurance company. And then number two, when you are able to just work, come and go as you please, bill as you want, and then all of a sudden you have someone that's like, now we're going to start doing caps on your hours, your job's changed. And so understandably, many of those people were upset and they took their ball and they went home. Where the psych testing practice is a bit different than a therapy practice is, now you've got all of these reports that are in motion and no one's there to finish them. And so while I had reached out to these clinicians saying, hey, can you just finish off on the work that it was billed under your license? No response. And here I was stuck with having to finish hundreds of reports on my own. Cut number 8. When I look back at this autopsy of my practice, one very hard learned lesson that I'll never ever need to learn again is how quickly things can turn upside down and how you need someone at the ship, at the helm, always looking out for glaciers. We hit a glacier, a big one, and no one saw it coming. So as these payments started to dry up and as cost containment was just not even there was no cost containment, and our providers and techs were billing whatever they felt like they should bill, I had to take out a business line of credit to make payroll for the first time in years, thinking this is just temporary, until it happened again and again and again. Now keep in mind, I'm trying to respond to the Better Business Bureau complaints from the patients who are like, where's my report? Because all of the clinicians have left. I'm trying to entertain the board complaints from said patients who were upset that they didn't get the right diagnosis, further delaying me on the other reports from those patients who are going to get mad. I'm dealing with the Attorney General, who is very easily reached, by the way, by your employees if they don't feel like they were paid all that they need to be paid, with a threat that now I owe triple if I don't pay this right away. So I'm trying to manage all of that and at the same time trying to figure out where our money is. And I'm not a biller. I'm frantically hiring billers at this point, throwing money at 6 different billers. Please go help me find this money. Meanwhile, timely filing limits are running out. They're saying, so sorry, you didn't get it in, or send in a paper claim now. They moved the goalpost. They changed from this name to this name. Now all of a sudden you've got to submit through this website, or it's a corrected claim, so you got to do a paper claim, and oh, you didn't do it in 30 days, so unfortunately it's denied. A patient can change their insurance over the course of the testing process. It's a long process. And so all of a sudden you're billing an insurance company where there's no active coverage. These are all the things that started to contribute to me almost losing my home. We got further and further into debt. And at one point I had over $250,000 leveraged on my home, trying to pay all the people to help me figure out where our money was. I was stuck. I could not close my practice. If I closed my practice and went bankrupt, I would have lost my home. And I remember so many sleepless nights thinking, okay, well, if we could just figure out this piece here, then maybe we can get a little cash infusion this way and then this way. But it was like whack-a-mole and there was no end in sight. I honestly was trapped. I had no idea what I was going to do. And not only do people not talk about this in our field, I think it's a source of shame. Psychological testing is a horse of a different color, so not many people are familiar with the ins and outs of that. Most of the time when I would reach out anonymously on these Facebook groups for clinicians, most of what I got was a lot of judgment from our helpers. So people that said, maybe you should question why you're even in business if you went this far upside down. I had reached out and then I was like immediately retracted because I just thought, I'm already so humiliated that this thing failed. And I feel like this thing that I was doing really well at, I was so crazy, so bad at business that I ruined it. I took this thing and I ruined it. And it's not like I can just like close the door and walk away. I'm stuck in this thing. And going back to part one of this, I thrived on being a good girl. I was the good student. I was well liked. I never got in trouble. I felt like a criminal at this point. People were eviscerating me online. Employees, patients. At a certain point, as a psychologist, you go, well, there's a common denominator here. If it keeps happening, maybe it is you. And you start to feel like maybe you are bad. Maybe that's what this all is. That you just got in over your head and you just are batting out of your league and you had no business owning a business. All of that in those sleepless nights. I remember in Thanksgiving of last year, I was so sad and so afraid. And around the holidays, I think most of us like to just shift and get in the cozy pajamas, listen to some Christmas music, drink the hot cocoa, and like say, all right, well, I've put in a good year. I'm going to like have some time with my family. And I could not do that. I was looking ahead towards patients' deductibles, saying, okay, you owe this much and you're going to owe this much. And please don't schedule this person until they've paid this amount. I couldn't stop. I could not stop. Meanwhile, I'm watching my kids grow up and I'm not there. I'm not at the slime stations. I'm not volunteering at the fun run because I am losing my hair over what I have done to my family. I'm about to lose my home. Cut number 9 in Death by a Thousand Cuts, Autopsy of a Practice, is the lack of unionization that clinicians experience. So in most large professions, there is a union where you can go there and argue for better pay, better treatment. But because clinicians are fragmented through state lines and different payers, I think purposely, it becomes very difficult to unionize because you're unionizing against 4,700 different employers, right? We deal with this fragmentation. We deal with this purposeful antiquity and obfuscation by the payers, and we have no ability to connect with others and afford the same lobbyists that these payers have. We've been sort of socialized to never talk about a payer or the rate because, oh my gosh, they can come after you. That's simply not true. And yet, if you are completely going private pay without doing sliding scale, you're somehow accused of being greedy, of being capitalistic, of being in the wrong profession. And so there's this guilt that you carry around with you. But let me give you an example. We aimed to take every single insurer in the state of Massachusetts. And One of the issues with Mass Health and Medicare is that you cannot charge a no-show fee. So if that patient decides, they wake up that morning and they decide they don't feel like coming, you got to just keep on rescheduling them until they do. Now, you still have to pay your providers to prep for that time, to prep for their test, to prep for their intake or their testing, and you can't charge that patient a no-show fee. And you have to keep on accepting them. That alone is part of a broken system that makes it incredibly difficult for quality providers to continue providing care for people who arguably need it the most. Cut 10 in this death by 1,000 cuts is the dehumanization loop that clinicians have experienced. We have become the unpaid shock absorbers of a broken economy. We absorb every denied claim, every client crisis, every just one more audit, every peer review, every delay, denial, clawback, or audit. And you're not getting that from the patient. They're taking that out of your pocket. And they can do it years later. Meanwhile, if you don't get your claim in within their 30-day timely filing limit window, you can say goodbye to ever being paid. So this is the loop. They overextend you, they underpay you, they overregulate you, repeat. We call it ethics, but it's sadomasochism. We didn't fail the system failed us, and it was engineered that way. We are the people that aimed to set out and help people who really need it. And ironically, we are burning out in record numbers. I watched a podcast this morning of a man who was a therapist who became a bartender that made more as a bartender. And instead of helping people get off of substances, he was pushing substances and made more. This is why we have a broken mental health care system. Clinicians like me are running small empires with the same liabilities as Fortune 500 CEOs, except we can't afford a legal department or PR team or HR team when it all blows up on social media. We face audits, board complaints, insurance clawbacks, staff turnover, inflation, and we're still expected to smile and post a quote about self-care. We carry risk without representation. We pay taxes like business owners, get reimbursed like case managers, and sleep like haunted dolls. Meanwhile, insurance companies are vertically integrating mental health services and recording record billion-dollar profits. Buying up telehealth platforms, hiring clinicians on salary, lobbying circles around us. We're still arguing about whether it's ethical to charge a no-show fee. When I talk to clinicians across states, the story's the same. We have all the responsibility of healthcare and none of the representation. We're the workforce that can't unionize because we're too traumatized by HIPAA to share a spreadsheet. Let's zoom out. This isn't just my story. This is what happens when a $1 trillion industry runs on unpaid overtime and moral guilt. Behavioral health has always been the redheaded stepchild of medicine, underfunded, overregulated, and expected to heal trauma for the price of a copay. We are the most scrutinized, least protected professionals in healthcare. Our licenses are no longer paper shields, but cages, handcuffs. Our ethics codes were written before email, and every innovation somehow means less money and more paperwork. The system doesn't need us well, it needs us compliant. So here's the part where I'm going to do some reflection because, yes, there's a lot of odds stacked against us, but there's certainly things that I could have done better. And if I were a different person or had learned these lessons sooner, I think could have subverted some of these tragedies in the practice. I could make this all about the system. And yes, the system is broken. But I also broke things. I got cocky. There's a point where I thought, I figured this out. I'm scaling. I'm different. And I wasn't different. I was just moving too fast to notice the fires behind me. I'm impulsive by nature. I have all the buzzwords that sound good in a mastermind. Visionary, maverick, quick start, all that stuff. But it's not easy to work with me. If I have an idea on Monday, I want to implement it by Wednesday, and I forgot about it on Friday. And at 40 plus employees, you can't run a business like that. But I did. I tried. I'm awful with details. I'll roll out a new policy and I'll expect everybody to move at my pace. Then I get frustrated when people aren't moving the same way. They can't keep up with the pivots. I abdicate it when I should have delegated. I threw money and tech solutions at problems instead of just sitting in the discomfort sometimes of solving them slowly. I'm not a phone person. I talked for a living for 20 years, and I loathe meetings, and I probably could have had a lot more of those where tone got misconstrued in an email or a text. Some of those conversations, those sweaty back conversations that we need to have as leaders, I didn't want to have. And instead it was an email or a text that was taken the wrong way. My tone got misconstrued a lot, and my tone didn't get misconstrued a lot. A lot of times I was just a tyrant. When I get scared, I don't flight, I fight, and I move quick. And sometimes cutting off my nose to spite my face. An employee would push back, and instead of pausing to understand why, I'd see it as betrayal or disloyalty. So I'd make a fast decision to protect myself. I'd fire someone, cut ties. And what do they say? Hire slow, fire fast. It would all be under the badge of that, right? Burn a bridge, only to realize later I didn't have all the information. I didn't know how much of a lifeline that person was in my practice, right? My eyes have always been too big for my stomach, and I don't know that that's ever going to change. I want to do all the things at once. I want to build the practice, scale it, mentor, teach, innovate. I want it to create culture, be the good boss, be the visionary. And in trying to do it all, I ended up pissing off a lot of people. Staff who thrived on consistency got a lot of chaos. And clients who needed stability got a practice in constant transition. And my family got it the worst. They got the burnt out version of me for many years. I am not an MBA. I'm not measured. I'm not groomed to be a CEO. I'm a bootstrap clinician with no formal business training who watched some YouTube videos, read traction, and thought, how hard could this be? And it turns out it's very hard. I didn't even know how to read a P&L until we were already underwater. I didn't understand profit margins or runway or even what OPEX meant. And I just hired an integrator thinking she'd fix it. But you can't outsource self-awareness. So when I say the practice died, yes, insurance killed it. The system is rigged. The system is broken. The generational divide and the admin burden, vertical integration, they all play their part certainly. But I also had a hand in it with my impulsivity, my ego at times, my inability to slow down, to compromise, my refusal to admit I was in over my head at times, my refusal to just sit still sometimes, take the win. And I think it's easier to be the hero or the victim in your own story, but I was both and neither. I was just a person who cared too much but knew too little. I was operating the yellow cab in the age of Uber, trying to build something sustainable in a system designed for extinction. So what did I learn from all that? Well, speed isn't a strategy. Don't abdicate, delegate. Stop trading your time for money. The system's broken. Visionary without execution is just expensive chaos, and that you can't scale a business faster than you can regulate your own nervous system. So here's the thing about this autopsy of my practice, and probably so many other people that decided to close their practices. It's not about blame. It's about understanding what went wrong. So maybe the next generation doesn't have to die in the same way. I think as more of us have these open conversations and talk about this, as more of us leave the field of insurance and refuse to play their game, yes, there will be a system and a great divide where only those who can afford it will get good mental health care. But then perhaps we'll hit a tipping point where society will demand change. And I hope that I didn't put everyone to sleep. I hope that this was helpful. I hope that if you're feeling alone, like I was last year, that you are not feeling alone after this. This isn't a story about failure. It's a love letter to every clinician who has ever wondered if the problem was them, when really it's the infrastructure. It's the system. It's broken, and it's not in our favor. Our Rudy-esque ending, our fairy tale ending. By the grace of God, I found a buyer. I simply put my business on Biz Buy Sell and had, tons and tons of inquiries And then of that, you'll get, like 2% that are actually really, really interested, vetted buyers. And then I had a couple people that were seriously moving forward with like an NDA and purchase sale agreement or an LOI, letter of intention. Found someone who had way more operational experience than I did, had run a bunch of urgent care centers, and just essentially was exactly what this company needed to heal and repair. Had the infrastructure, had the capital, and believed in the model and saw that for so long we were profitable. And that's what a lot of these buyers are doing now when looking at your practice. Is typically they understand that we as clinicians are not great business owners, and there's some arbitrage there in their ability to bring their business expertise and knowledge to your business and turn a profit. I will say, if you are in a place where you are feeling hopeless or you're feeling stuck like I was, please know that that would be my first suggestion, is go on Biz Buy Sell. You can do it anonymously, and you can at least get a sense of the pulse of the market and what's out there. I'm also happy to help you in just consulting with you along this process and navigating this process, the M&A deals and setting up NDAs and all that kind of stuff, as I did most of this stuff on my own. It has been a absolute dream. This person had the capital to rebrand, to actually hire a marketing team, to repair the reputation, to hire a good CFO, to hire a team, an entire team of people that renegotiate our rates with the payers, to be able to hire enough staff to get through all of the reports. I mean, yeah, it's amazing what capital will do. And I have every belief in the fact that this person will take this business and absolutely soar with it. And I'm so, so happy. Luckily, I got obviously out of the fear of losing my home, which is good. And I was able to sell the practice for 7 figures. So that's something that can never be taken away from me. It's a great data point. In those moments, those dark, dark moments where you go, am I even intelligent? Like, what is wrong? Why are you experiencing all these issues? I always have that now in my back pocket. Like, listen, you scaled, bootstrapped, and sold this thing from nothing to 7 figures. And that's not something to take lightly. So that has certainly helped me in repairing just my sense of self as a person. Obviously, I could sleep much better now knowing that I'm not in danger of losing my home. And the sheer weight of not having all of the jobs I had before and all of the operations and all the fires and all of that stuff that goes with it has been amazing. While I'm probably not supposed to say much about the deal, I think it's pretty common that most people have some sort of transition period, which I'm in, where I am simply a consultant for the company. And it has been a dream to feel as an employee. Like, I provide this thing, and then all the rest of the stuff I don't worry about. And that has been such a breath of fresh air. I will say I am doing EMDR right now because and I don't even want to use the word trauma, because there are so many other people that have had so many more traumatic things happen to them. But I do notice my nervous system is still on fire, despite the fire being put out months ago. And I'm not sleeping. I'm not taking care of myself. I'm not eating. I think the sympathetic nervous system is still going. And so I am taking steps to address that and, obviously understand the importance of that from a mental health perspective. The last thing I'll say is that the biggest piece that has been so cool after the sell and the rise and the fall and all the scorched earth and everything that happened in such short amount of time has been the freedom that has opened up for me to be able to do this podcast and to write books and to be more creative and do all the things that I would keep on doing even if I never get paid for them. So I do think that all of that training that you have as a clinician is not for naught. That is a moat. And it's just about learning to navigate a new earth where you can leverage technology and modern tools to take your specialty and your skills and do one to many versus one to one, whether that be through Etsy, through your YouTube channel, through your podcast, through your books, coaching, retreats. But it doesn't have to be the way that we once thought. Private practice, slugging it away with your shingle out front, just trying to get Doris, your front office manager, to turn in a bill. I don't think that works anymore. And I think the sooner that we realize that, the better off we'll be as a field. Thanks, guys, for listening. If this episode hit something raw, share it with another clinician who's still sprinting. Leave a review, because algorithms don't listen to therapy, but they do listen to you. Subscribe for season 2 of Off the Chair, The Reconstruction, where we stop coding collapse and start writing the recovery plan. Until next time, rest, regulate, and rebel responsibly. Or not.